The gleaming glass towers of Manhattan's financial district rose before Isabella Mitchell, like crystalline monuments to her past. 6 years had transformed this skyline, just as time had transformed her. At 31, she stood taller, moved with calculated precision, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt themselves from ashes. "Mommy, look at that building. It looks like it touches the clouds." Alexander's excited voice drew her attention downward. Her son's bright blue eyes, so painfully like his father's, sparkled with wonder as he pointed at the towering structures. "It does, doesn't it?" Isabella squeezed his small hand, then glanced at his twin sister, Olivia, who was studying the buildings with the same analytical expression Isabella often saw in her own mirror. At 5 years old, the twins were already showing distinct personalities that both delighted and terrified her. They were living reminders of both her greatest joy and deepest pain. "Remember what Mommy told you about today?" Isabella knelt between them, straightening Alexander's little tie and smoothing Olivia's dark curls. The children nodded solemnly, their matching faces serious. "We're going to the special daycare while you work at your new job," Olivia recited, ever the practical one. "And we can't tell anyone our last name." "That's right, my smart girl." Isabella's throat tightened. The necessity of such secrecy weighed heavily on her, but it was crucial to her plans. The twins knew her only as Mommy, but to the rest of the world starting today, she would be Isabella Carter, the brilliant strategist hired to help modernize Reynolds Enterprises' market approach. Reynolds Enterprises. The company name alone sent a sharp pain through her chest. 6 years ago, she'd been Isabella Reynolds, wife of Leonardo Reynolds, the company's CEO. Now, she was returning not as a wife, but as an agent of carefully orchestrated chaos. The exclusive child care center she'd chosen was only 2 blocks from Reynolds Enterprises. As Isabella helped the twins settle in, she couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Her children would spend their days so close to their father's office, yet he remained oblivious to their existence. "I'll be back to pick you up at 5 my loves." Isabella hugged them tightly, breathing in their familiar scent of bubble bath and innocence. Alexander clung a moment longer, always the more sensitive of the two. "Promise you'll come back," he whispered, and Isabella's heart cracked a little more. "I will always come back to you," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Always." 20 minutes later, Isabella stood in the marble lobby of Reynolds Enterprises, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she approached security. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, her navy suit impeccably tailored. She'd spent years preparing for this moment, building a new identity, gaining experience at competitor firms, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to infiltrate Leonardo's company. "Isabella Carter for Human Resources," she stated calmly, presenting her ID. The security guard checked his list and nodded, handing her a visitor's badge. As she pinned it to her lapel, she caught her reflection in the glossy marble wall. The woman staring back at her bore little resemblance to the naive 25-year-old who had last walked these halls. That woman had believed in forever. She had trusted Leonardo Reynolds with her heart, her future, her everything. That woman had been destroyed one rainy night when she'd returned home early from a business trip to find Leonardo in their bed with Victoria Chen, his chief financial officer. The memory of that night still had the power to steal her breath. The way Leonardo had looked at her with cold disdain, Victoria's triumphant smirk, the cruel words that had followed. "You're broken, Isabella. You can't give me children. Victoria can—" "I've already filed for divorce." Isabella's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, remembering how she'd stood there in frozen shock, already carrying his children, but not yet knowing it. By the time she'd discovered her pregnancy 2 weeks later, Leonardo had already forced her out of their home and their social circle, spreading rumors that painted her as unstable and desperate. The elevator dinged, pulling her back to the present. As she stepped inside, she pressed the button for the executive floor. Her new position as Strategic Innovation Director would put her in direct contact with Leonardo and his leadership team. They would see her every day, work with her closely, and never suspect that the polished professional before them was the woman they'd destroyed. Victoria's voice carried down the hallway as Isabella approached the executive suite. "The market projections are concerning, Leo. We need fresh perspectives. That's why we hired the new strategist." Leonardo's deep voice sent an unwanted shiver down Isabella's spine. The board was impressed with her track record at Morrison Global, Isabella straightened her shoulders and rounded the corner. The sight of him hit her like a physical blow. At 34, Leonardo Reynolds had only grown more handsome. His dark hair was touched with distinguished silver at the temples, his jaw stronger, his presence even more commanding. But there was something tired in his blue eyes, something haunted in the set of his mouth. Victoria stood too close to him, her hand possessively on his arm. A diamond ring glittered on her finger, the same ring that had once belonged to Isabella. "Mr. Reynolds," Isabella said smoothly, extending her hand. "I'm Isabella Carter. Thank you for this opportunity." Leonardo's grip was firm, professional. There was no recognition in his eyes as they shook hands, no indication that he saw past her carefully constructed facade to the woman he'd once vowed to love forever. Victoria's handshake was brief and dismissive, her attention already returning to Leonardo. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter," Leonardo replied. "We have high expectations for what you'll bring to Reynolds Enterprises." If he only knew. Isabella smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "I assure you, Mr. Reynolds, I intend to exceed those expectations. I have plans for this company that will change everything." And she did. Plans within plans, each one designed to systematically dismantle the empire Leonardo had built. She would use every skill, every connection, every weakness she'd spent years studying to bring him to his knees. Only then, when he had lost everything as she once had, would she reveal who she really was. But as Isabella followed them into the conference room for her first executive meeting, a small voice that sounded suspiciously like Alexander whispered in her mind. "At what cost, Mommy?" She pushed the thought away. The time for doubt had passed. She was no longer the innocent young woman who believed in love and happy endings. She was a mother protecting her children, a strategist executing a carefully crafted plan, and a woman determined to have her revenge. Leonardo Reynolds had taught her that love was weakness. Now she would teach him that betrayal had consequences. Leonardo Reynolds stared at the presentation before him, but his mind kept drifting to the enigmatic woman who delivered it. Isabella Carter had commanded the boardroom with a quiet intensity that felt strangely familiar. Her strategic analysis of Reynolds Enterprises' market vulnerabilities was both brilliant and unsettling. "The company's current approach is fundamentally flawed," she had stated, her voice carrying no trace of apology. "Your competitors are already positioning themselves to exploit these weaknesses. Without immediate intervention, Reynolds Enterprises risks losing its market dominance within 18 months. Now, alone in his corner office as evening settled over Manhattan, Leonardo reviewed her proposals again. She'd identified blind spots that had been nagging at him for months, articulating concerns he'd struggled to name. It was both impressive and threatening, exactly what he'd hired her for, yet somehow more than he'd bargained for. His office door opened without a knock. Victoria strode in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "We need to talk about your new hire." Leonardo suppressed a sigh. After 6 years of marriage, Victoria's presence had become more exhausting than exciting. "What about her?" "She's dangerous." Victoria perched on his desk, ignoring his obvious preference for professional distance. "Her proposals would dismantle half of my financial framework. Her proposals would modernize our approach and protect us from emerging threats." Leonardo leaned back, studying his wife's perfect features. Where he had once seen ambition and drive, he now saw only calculation and control. "That's why we hired her." "We hired her because the board insisted," Victoria corrected sharply. "But I've been running the numbers on her suggestions. The implementation costs alone would be offset by projected revenue increases within 2 quarters. A calm voice interrupted. Isabella Carter stood in the doorway, a stack of reports in her arms. "I have the detailed analysis here, if you'd like to review it." Leonardo watched the two women assess each other. Victoria's practiced smile didn't reach her eyes, while Isabella's expression remained professionally neutral, yet something in the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. "Ms. Carter," Victoria's voice dripped honey-coated venom, "I don't believe we scheduled a meeting." "You didn't, but since we're discussing my proposals, I thought actual data might be relevant to the conversation." Isabella stepped into the office, her movements precise and controlled. "Unless you prefer to make decisions based on personal opinions rather than facts." Leonardo bit back a smile. Few people dared to challenge Victoria so directly. "Please, Mrs. Carter, show us your analysis." For the next hour, Isabella methodically dismantled every one of Victoria's objections with hard data and strategic insight. Leonardo found himself drawn into her vision for the company's future, a vision that somehow aligned perfectly with his own half-formed ideas. When Victoria finally left, her departure carried the chill of future confrontations. Isabella gathered her materials efficiently, but Leonardo noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "That couldn't have been comfortable for you," he observed. "Comfort isn't part of my job description, Mr. Reynolds." She met his gaze steadily. "Results are, call me Leo, everyone does." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Something flickered in her eyes, pain, anger, but disappeared so quickly he might have imagined it. "I prefer to maintain professional boundaries, Mr. Reynolds. Experience has taught me their value." As she turned to leave, Leonardo found himself studying her profile. There was something about her that tugged at his memory, like a word caught on the tip of his tongue. "Have we met before, Ms. Carter?" She paused at the door. "I think I would remember meeting someone like you, Mr. Reynolds." After she left, Leonardo found himself unable to focus on work. His thoughts kept returning to the past, to another dark-haired woman who had once challenged and inspired him. Isabella, his Isabella, not this new one, had possessed the same quiet strength before he destroyed it. The familiar weight of guilt settled in his chest. 6 years, and he still dreamed of her sometimes, still woke reaching for her, only to find Victoria's perfectly manicured form beside him, still wondered if... His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Leonardo didn't bother responding. Their marriage had devolved into a business arrangement, held together by shared secrets and mutual benefit. Victoria had given him the heir she promised, a 4-year-old son who looked nothing like him and spent most of his time with nannies. Gathering his things, Leonardo decided to walk home through the cooling evening air. His penthouse was only 15 blocks away, and he needed to clear his head. As he passed a small park, the sound of children's laughter drew his attention. 2 dark-haired children, a boy and a girl who appeared to be twins, were chasing each other around a playground while their mother watched from a bench. Something about their free, joyful movement made his chest ache. He'd always wanted children, real ones, not the political prop Victoria had provided. The mother looked up, and Leonardo quickly turned away. It was Miss Carter. The coincidence startled him, but what struck harder was the transformation in her expression as she watched her children. All her professional reserve had melted away, replaced by a love so fierce it was almost tangible. Leonardo forced himself to keep walking, but the image stayed with him. He had noticed Ms. Carter was wearing no wedding ring, had overheard someone mention she was a single mother. How did she manage it all? Running a household alone while executing high-level corporate strategy? His thoughts drifted again to his first Isabella. Had she found someone else? Started a family? He had forbidden anyone from mentioning her name after their divorce, had buried himself in work to avoid facing what he'd done. But seeing Ms. Carter with her children had cracked something open inside him. Reaching his building, Leonardo nodded to the doorman and took the private elevator to his penthouse. Victoria's absence felt more like relief than loss. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city he'd conquered at the cost of everything else. His phone buzzed again, an email from Miss Carter with additional analysis she'd prepared after hours. Her dedication was impressive, her intelligence undeniable, but it was the glimpse of her softer side in the park that intrigued him most. She was a puzzle, this woman who could shift from corporate warrior to loving mother without missing a beat. Leonardo closed the email without responding. It was dangerous to admire Mrs. Carter's complexity, dangerous to notice the grace of her movements or the depth in her dark eyes. He had learned the hard way that mixing business with pleasure only led to destruction. Yet as he prepared for another solitary evening, Leonardo couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. Miss Carter's arrival had disturbed the careful equilibrium of his world, and he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to restore it. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that every crack in his armor was being meticulously observed and noted. Every response, every reaction, every unguarded moment was ammunition in a war he didn't yet know he was fighting. In her own apartment across town, Isabella tucked her sleeping children into bed and opened her laptop. Today's observations went into an encrypted file, each detail another piece in her elaborate plan. Leonardo's obvious dissatisfaction with Victoria, his lingering guilt about the past, His reaction to seeing her with the twins, all of it would serve her purpose. "Sweet dreams, my darlings," she whispered to Alexander and Olivia. Their peaceful faces strengthened her resolve. Tomorrow she would return to Reynolds Enterprises and continue dismantling Leonardo's world, one calculated move at a time. The game had begun. Isabella's fingers flew across her keyboard, finalizing the presentation that would initiate the first real phase of her plan. 3 weeks at Reynolds Enterprises had given her enough insight to identify the perfect pressure point: Victoria's pet project, a risky acquisition she'd pushed through 2 years ago. "Ms. Carter?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Reynolds would like to see you in his office." Isabella checked her watch. 7:30 p.m. Most employees had left hours ago, but she'd stayed late, as she did most nights after picking up the twins from daycare and having dinner with them. Her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a godsend, watching the children in the evenings when work demanded her attention. "Now?" Isabella asked, although she already knew the answer. He said it's urgent. The walk to Leonardo's office gave her time to fortify her emotional walls. These late-night meetings were becoming more frequent, each one a dangerous dance of professional insight and personal undercurrents. Leonardo was increasingly letting his guard down around her, sharing concerns about the company that he wouldn't voice to others. She found him standing at his windows, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The casual intimacy of his appearance was a trap she refused to fall into. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Reynolds." He turned, and the intensity of his gaze caught her off guard. "Your analysis of the Chen Tech acquisition landed on my desk today." Isabella kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced at the mention of Victoria's maiden name. "Yes, the data suggests it was significantly overvalued. Victoria pushed hard for that deal." Leonardo ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. She insisted it would revolutionize our tech division. Instead, it's bleeding money and resources. Isabella moved to his desk, spreading out the relevant documents. The technology was outdated before we acquired it. Someone didn't do proper due diligence. Or someone had deliberately misled the board, she thought, remembering how Victoria had used the deal to strengthen her position within the company. Leonardo leaned over her shoulder to examine the reports, his proximity sending unwanted shivers down her spine. "These numbers can't be right." "I triple-checked them myself." Isabella stepped away, maintaining professional distance. "Mr. Reynolds, your wife's financial decisions—" "Let's leave Victoria out of this discussion." His tone carried a warning edge. "What do you recommend?" Isabella met his gaze steadily. "Sell it. Cut our losses before the market realizes how bad the situation is. I've identified 3 potential buyers who might—" A knock interrupted her. Victoria stood in the doorway, her expression thunderous. "Leo, we need to talk. Privately. We're in the middle of something important," Leonardo replied, his voice tight. "More important than your son?" Victoria's words dripped poison. "Nathan's school called. Again. But I suppose Ms. Carter's reports take priority over family matters." Isabella watched Leonardo's face tighten with guilt and frustration. Victoria's manipulation was obvious. She wielded Leonardo's strained relationship with his son like a weapon. "We can continue this tomorrow," Isabella said smoothly, gathering her materials. As she passed Victoria, their eyes met in silent combat. Victoria's smirk spoke volumes about her perceived victory. Instead of returning to her office, Isabella took the elevator to the lobby. She needed air, needed to escape the suffocating tension of the executive floor. Outside, the spring evening had turned cool, and she wished she'd brought a jacket. "Miss Carter!" Leonardo's voice stopped her on the sidewalk. He jogged to catch up, his own jacket slung over his arm. "You forgot this." He held out a folder she'd intentionally left behind, but instead of taking it, Isabella found herself asking, "Why do you let her control you like that?" The question hung between them, far too personal for their professional relationship. Leonardo's expression darkened. "You don't know anything about my marriage. I know manipulation when I see it." Isabella's voice was quiet but firm. "And I know guilt is a powerful chain." Speaking from experience, his question carried unexpected gentleness. Isabella swallowed hard, remembering another life when she'd been the one manipulated by guilt and lies. "We all have regrets, Mr. Reynolds. The question is whether we let them define us." A car horn blared nearby, breaking the moment. Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez saying Alexander had a nightmare and was asking for her. "And I have to go," she said, taking the folder from his hand. "My children need me. You're twins. They seem like wonderful kids." Leonardo's voice stopped her again. "I saw you with them in the park last week. You're a remarkable mother." The compliment cut like a knife. If he only knew they were his children, that his own flesh and blood had been playing mere feet away from him. "Thank you," she managed. "Good night, Mr. Reynolds." The subway ride home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Isabella had prepared for every contingency except this, the way Leonardo's presence still affected her, the glimpses of the man she'd once loved beneath his corporate armor. She found Alexander curled up in her bed, his sister keeping faithful watch beside him. "Mommy!" he cried, launching himself into her arms. "And I dreamed you went away like Daddy did." Isabella held him close, meeting Olivia's worried eyes over his head. "I will never leave you, sweetheart. Never. Promise?" Both twins asked in unison. "I promise." She gathered them close, breathing in their sweet scent. "You two are the best thing that ever happened to me." Later, after the twins had fallen asleep in her bed, Isabella opened her laptop to update her plan. The Chen Tech analysis would force the board to question Victoria's judgment, potentially creating the first cracks in her carefully constructed facade. But as Isabella typed, her fingers hesitated. Was she fighting the right enemy? Victoria had orchestrated their separation, yes, but Leonardo had chosen to believe the worst about his wife without question. He had thrown away their marriage, their love, their future based on lies he should have seen through. Her phone lit up with a message from Leonardo. "Thank you for your honesty tonight. Sometimes we need someone to hold up a mirror." Isabella stared at the text, her throat tight with unshed tears. 6 years ago, she would have given anything to hear him acknowledge his mistakes. Now, it was just another complication in an already complex game. She closed her laptop without responding to his message. Tomorrow, she would release her findings about Chen Tech to the board. Tomorrow, she would continue executing her plan to destroy the man who had destroyed her. But tonight, she held her children, their children, and allowed herself to grieve for everything that had been lost, and everything that could never be again. Or so she told herself, even as a treacherous part of her heart whispered that perhaps not all was lost after all. The boardroom crackled with tension as Isabella presented her findings on the Chen Tech acquisition. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on her presentation, but she felt Leonardo's gaze most acutely. He sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as she systematically exposed the flaws in what had been his wife's crowning achievement. "In conclusion," Isabella stated, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "the Chen Tech acquisition has cost Reynolds Enterprises nearly $50 million in losses, with projected losses doubling if we maintain current operations." Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "These projections are based on incomplete data. I assure you, Mrs. Reynolds, the data is quite complete." Isabella clicked to her final slide, including the original valuation reports that were mysteriously absent from the board's acquisition package. The room erupted in murmurs. Isabella had spent weeks tracking down those missing documents, which proved Victoria had deliberately inflated Chen Tech's value. It was her first major move against her enemies, and she'd executed it perfectly, until Leonardo's son threw an unexpected wrench into her plans. "Mr. Reynolds," his assistant interrupted urgently. "Thornathan's school is on the line. There's been an incident." Leonardo stood immediately, but Victoria remained seated. "I'm sure the nanny can handle it," she said dismissively. "This meeting is too important. My son is more important than any meeting." Leonardo's voice carried an edge Isabella had never heard before. He turned to the board. "Please excuse me. Miss Carter, can you continue the presentation?" Isabella nodded, fighting the urge to react to Victoria's obvious displeasure. As Leonardo left, she proceeded to outline her recommendations for minimizing the damage from the failed acquisition. The board members were receptive, particularly when she presented potential buyers who could help recoup some of their losses. 2 hours later, she was gathering her materials when her phone buzzed. Mrs. Rodriguez's name flashed on the screen, sending a spike of anxiety through her chest. "Olivia fell at the playground," her neighbor said without preamble. "The school nurse thinks she might need stitches." Isabella's world narrowed to a pinpoint of fear. "I'm on my way." She practically ran to her office, grabbing her purse and keys. In her haste, she collided with someone in the hallway. Leonardo, Miss Carter. He steadied her with hands on her shoulders. Is everything all right? My daughter, she's hurt. I have to go. The words tumbled out as she tried to step around him. Let my driver take you, he offered immediately. You're in no state to drive. Before she could protest, he was guiding her toward the elevator, calling his driver. The kindness in his voice made her want to cry. This was the Leonardo she'd fallen in love with, the man who cared, who acted without hesitation when someone needed help. In the backseat of his luxury car, Isabella clutched her phone, waiting for updates. Leonardo sat beside her, his presence both comforting and torturous. Nathan had another fight at school, he said quietly. He's so angry lately. I don't know how to reach him. Isabella wanted to ignore him, to focus solely on getting to Olivia, but she heard the pain in his voice, remembered how it felt to watch a child struggle. Sometimes anger is easier than hurt, she said softly. You sound like you speak from experience. My children. Isabella hesitated, then continued carefully. They ask about their father sometimes, dealing with their pain, their questions. It's the hardest part of being a single parent. Their father isn't in the picture. He doesn't know they exist. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. Leonardo was silent for a moment. That seems like vital information to keep from someone. Sometimes we make choices to protect the people we love, Isabella replied, her voice tight, even if those choices hurt us in the process. The car stopped outside the elementary school. Isabella rushed inside, Leonardo following without invitation. They found Olivia in the nurse's office, her small face tear-stained but brave. Alexander sat beside her, holding her hand and glaring at anyone who came too close. Mommy, they cried in unison. Isabella gathered them both close, her heart racing. Olivia had a nasty cut above her eyebrow, but she was alert and talking. What happened, sweetheart? I was trying to do a flip on the monkey bars, Olivia admitted. Like in gymnastics class. The nurse says she needs stitches, Mrs. Rodriguez explained. I would have taken her to the hospital, but I needed your authorization. I know an excellent pediatric plastic surgeon, Leonardo interjected. I can have her see Olivia right now. Isabella turned, suddenly remembering his presence. He stood in the doorway, watching her children with an odd expression. Did some part of him recognize himself in Alexander's protective stance, or his own determination in Olivia's attempt at a difficult feat? That's very kind, but please let me help. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You've done so much for my company lately. This is the least I can do. 20 minutes later, they were in a private medical office. Olivia being treated by one of New York's top pediatric surgeons. Alexander refused to leave his sister's side, while Isabella and Leonardo waited outside. They're remarkable children, Leonardo observed. The way they look out for each other. They're all they've had besides me. Isabella watched through the window as Alexander made faces to distract Olivia from the stitches. Their bond is incredible. How old are they? 5. Isabella's heart thundered in her chest. The same age as Nathan. Leonardo's voice carried a note of wistfulness, though he's nothing like them. Sometimes I wonder if he's really... He trailed off, but Isabella knew what he'd been about to say. She'd seen recent photos of Nathan Reynolds, a fair-haired child who bore no resemblance to his supposed father. Mr. Reynolds, Leo, he corrected softly. After today, I think you can call me Leo. Leo. His name felt dangerous on her tongue. Thank you for your help. But this doesn't change anything about the Chen Tech situation. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. The board wants to launch an investigation into the original acquisition. Victoria is not handling it well. Are you? Isabella asked before she could stop herself. Am I handling the fact that my wife apparently deceived the entire board and cost the company millions? Or that my marriage is a sham and my son might not be mine? His bitter laugh held no humor. What do you think, Ms. Carter? Before she could respond, the door opened. Olivia emerged with a butterfly bandage above her eye, looking proud of her battle scar. The doctor said I was super brave, Mommy. You were amazing, Isabella agreed, hugging her daughter. Both of you were. As they prepared to leave, Leonardo knelt to the twins' level. Well, next time you want to try something daring on the playground, maybe start with something a little lower to the ground. Olivia giggled. Okay, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you for helping my sister, Alexander added solemnly, his blue eyes, so like his father's, meeting Leonardo's directly. Something flickered across Leonardo's face. Recognition? Confusion? But before he could respond, Victoria's sharp voice cut through the moment. Leo, what are you doing here? Nathan's waiting at home. Isabella gathered her children close as Victoria approached, her heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. The other woman's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Just helping a valued employee in an emergency, Leonardo replied smoothly. Standing, Miss Carter, take tomorrow off to be with your children. We can continue our discussion about Chen Tech when you return. Isabella nodded, hurrying her twins toward the exit. As they left, she heard Victoria's angry whispers begin, but she didn't look back. Her carefully constructed plans were shifting, complicated by Leonardo's kindness and her children's unexpected interaction with their father. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Isabella stared at her revenge strategy document for a long time before closing it without updates. The game was changing, and she wasn't entirely sure she was still playing to win. She just wasn't sure what winning meant anymore. Victoria's retaliation came swiftly and viciously. Isabella arrived at work the following Monday to find her access to key financial systems revoked, and rumors circulating about her unauthorized investigation into Chen Tech. A simple clerical error with your security clearance, Victoria explained with a predatory smile when Isabella confronted her. I'm sure it will be sorted out soon. Until then, perhaps you should focus on less sensitive projects. Isabella maintained her professional mask, but inside, her anger burned cold and fierce. Interesting timing, considering the board's decision to audit all acquisitions from the past 5 years. Be careful, Ms. Carter. Victoria stepped closer, dropping her voice. You're playing a game you don't understand. Accidents happen to people who dig too deep. The threat was clear, but Victoria didn't know she was threatening a woman who had already lost everything once before. Isabella merely smiled. Is that what happened to Chen Tech's original valuation reports? Mrs. Reynolds? An accident? Before Victoria could respond, Leonardo's voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Both women turned to find him watching them with narrowed eyes. Victoria immediately softened her stance, but Isabella caught the flash of calculation in her expression. Just a technical issue with Mrs. Carter's access, Victoria said smoothly. I was explaining the situation. Restore her access immediately, Leonardo ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Ms. Carter's investigation has the board's full support. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm. Of course, darling. I'll handle it personally. As Victoria stalked away, Leonardo turned to Isabella. Are you all right? That looked intense. I can handle Victoria Reynolds, Isabella assured him, though her heart was racing from the confrontation. How's Olivia's gift working out? Leonardo's face softened at the mention of her daughter. He had sent Olivia a deluxe art set after her accident, complete with professional-grade colored pencils and a sketchbook. I hope she likes it. Nathan never showed any interest in art, but something about Olivia reminded me. He trailed off, that puzzled look crossing his face again. Isabella knew what he was feeling, the subconscious recognition of his own artistic talent in their daughter. Leonardo had once filled sketchbooks with beautiful drawings, before Victoria convinced him it was a waste of a CEO's time. She loves it, Isabella said quietly. She's been drawing non-stop. Alexander insists on hanging every picture on the refrigerator. They're very close. You're twins. Leonardo's voice held a note of envy. Nathan's so isolated. Sometimes I wonder if having a sibling would have made a difference. The irony of his words hit Isabella like a physical blow. His children did have a sibling. They had each other. But before she could process the emotion, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Excuse me, she said, checking the screen. Her contact in the IT department had come through with crucial information. I need to handle something. In her office, Isabella reviewed the encrypted files her source had provided. They proved what she had suspected. Victoria hadn't just manipulated the Chen Tech acquisition. She had been systematically siphoning money from Reynolds Enterprises through a network of shell companies. Isabella's hands shook as she processed the implications. This was it, the evidence she needed to destroy Victoria completely. But using it would have consequences far beyond her original plan for revenge. A knock at her door made her quickly close the files. Leonardo entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might need this. You've been holed up in here for hours. Thank you. Isabella accepted the coffee, trying to ignore how domestic the gesture felt. I found something you need to see. That sounds ominous. He settled into the chair across from her desk. Before I show you, I need to know something. Isabella met his eyes directly. How much are you willing to risk to learn the truth? Leonardo's expression turned serious. About Chentech? About everything. Isabella took a deep breath. What I've discovered, it goes far beyond one bad acquisition. Victoria has been... Her office phone rang, interrupting her. It was the twins' school. Alexander had gotten into a fight defending Olivia from bullies who were teasing her about her bandaged eyebrow. I have to go, Isabella said, gathering her things. My son, I'll drive you, Leonardo offered immediately. I should check on Nathan anyway. Victoria mentioned he's been having a rough day. The car ride was tense with unspoken words. Isabella clutched her laptop, which contained evidence that could shatter Leonardo's world even more thoroughly than she had planned. Beside her, Leonardo radiated anxiety about his own son's troubles. They reached the school to find both their children in the principal's office. Alexander sat protectively beside Olivia, sporting a split lip, but looking grimly satisfied. Nathan Reynolds slouched in a chair across the room, a bruise forming around his eye. He started it, Nathan accused as soon as his father entered. He just went crazy when I was talking to the girl. Is this true? Leonardo asked Alexander, who met his gaze without flinching. He made Olivia cry. Alexander stated firmly. He said her face would be ugly forever because of the stitches. Isabella's heart broke at the tears gathering in Olivia's eyes. She knelt beside her children, checking Alexander's injuries while Leonardo spoke quietly with Nathan. Mr. Reynolds, Ms. Carter. The principal addressed them both. This kind of behavior is unacceptable from any of our students. However, given the circumstances and Nathan's history of similar incidents, we're willing to be lenient this time. Leonardo's face tightened at the implied criticism of his son. Nathan, apologize to Olivia. Why should I? Nathan's defiance carried an edge of pain. You never even wanted me anyway. The boy's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Leonardo reached for his son, but Nathan jerked away and ran from the office. With a tortured look at Isabella, Leonardo followed. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep, Isabella sat in her home office staring at the evidence against Victoria. The day's events had shifted something fundamental in her perspective. She had wanted revenge against the man who abandoned her, but that man was as much a victim of Victoria's manipulations as she had been. Her phone lit up with a text from Leonardo. Nathan finally talked to me. He overheard Victoria telling someone I'm not his real father. I don't know what to do. Isabella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could use this moment of vulnerability to further her revenge, to push Leonardo closer to the edge. Instead, she found herself typing, "Children deserve the truth, even when it's painful. They're stronger than we think." His response came quickly. "Like your twins, they're remarkable kids. Alexander reminds me so much of..." He didn't finish the thought, but Isabella's heart raced. Was he beginning to see the truth? And if he did, what would that mean for her carefully constructed plans? Another text arrived. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something I need to show you about Victoria. I think you're the only person I can trust." Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 6 years of secrets and pain. Tomorrow she would have to decide, continue with her revenge and destroy Leonardo completely, or help him uncover the truth about Victoria and risk destroying herself in the process. Either way, the game was reaching its endgame, and the stakes had never been higher. The private dining room at Le Bernardin felt like neutral territory for a conversation that would change everything. Isabella arrived precisely at noon, her laptop containing the evidence against Victoria feeling heavier than usual. Leonardo was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing to pull out her chair. The gesture was unconsciously intimate, reminiscent of countless dinners they'd shared in their previous life. "I almost called you last night. Is Nathan okay?" Isabella asked, genuinely concerned about the boy who was, technically, her children's half-brother. Leonardo's face darkened. "He refused to come home. He's staying with my mother, which is probably for the best. Victoria didn't even notice he was gone until this morning." A waiter appeared with water and menus, but Leonardo waved him away. "I'm not here for lunch," he said, pulling out a thick folder. "This is what I wanted to show you." Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and correspondence that outlined a pattern of financial manipulation dating back years. Isabella's heart raced as she realized these documents complemented her own evidence perfectly. I started digging after your Chen Tech presentation, Leonardo explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. Victoria's been embezzling from the company since before we were married. The question is, why didn't our financial oversight catch this? Isabella took a careful sip of water, buying time to frame her response. Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see, like the fact that Nathan isn't my son. His bitter laugh held no humor. I had paternity tests done last night. Victoria doesn't know yet. Leo. Isabella reached for his hand without thinking, then pulled back. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I think I've always known, deep down, just like I've known something was wrong with Victoria's numbers. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. What I can't figure out is why. We were already wealthy. The company was successful. Why risk everything? Isabella opened her laptop, her finger hovering over the keyboard. Because Chen Tech wasn't just about money. It was about power and revenge. She turned the screen toward him, showing emails between Victoria and James Chen, her brother. They outlined a long-term plan to take control of Reynolds Enterprises through a combination of financial manipulation and personal sabotage. They've been working together for years, Isabella explained softly. Chen Tech was just one piece of a larger strategy. Leonardo's face went pale as he read. These dates? This started before Victoria and I were even married. Before your first wife. Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. How did you know I was married before? Leonardo's eyes snapped to hers, suddenly sharp with suspicion. Isabella's carefully constructed world teetered on the edge of collapse. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. 911, Victoria Reynolds at school asking to see twins. Claims to be their aunt. Ice flooded Isabella's veins. She stood so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. I have to go. Victoria's at my children's school. What? Leonardo rose with her. Why would she? Because she knows who I am, Isabella realized with horror. She must have figured it out when she saw the twins with you at the doctor's office. She grabbed her laptop and purse, but Leonardo caught her arm. Isabella, what aren't you telling me? The sound of her name, her real name on his lips made her freeze. She met his eyes and saw the dawning recognition there, the pieces finally falling into place. Those children, he whispered. Their age, their faces, Alexander's eyes. I can't do this right now. Isabella pulled away. I have to protect my children. Our children, Leonardo's voice cracked. Isabella, wait! But she was already running, her heels clicking against the restaurant's marble floors as she fled. In the taxi to the school, her mind raced with possibilities. Had Victoria known all along who she was? Had she been playing her own game while Isabella played hers? The school was in chaos when she arrived. Victoria stood in the office, wearing designer clothes and a victorious smile. Well, if it isn't Isabella Reynolds, she announced loudly. Or do you prefer Carter these days? Where are my children? Isabella demanded, her voice deadly calm. Safe with the principal, Victoria replied smoothly. I simply came to meet my niece and nephew. Imagine my surprise when I realized who their mother was. Leonardo's going to be devastated when he learns how you've deceived him. Again, like you deceived him, Isabella countered. I know everything, Victoria. About Chen Tech, about the embezzlement, about Nathan's real father. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Careful, Isabella. You're not the only one who can destroy lives. Mom! Alexander's voice cut through the tension. He and Olivia burst from the principal's office, running to Isabella. She gathered them close, her body shielding them from Victoria's calculating gaze. It's okay, she whispered to her children. Everything's okay. Is it? Leonardo's voice made them all turn. He stood in the doorway, his face a mask of barely controlled emotion. Is anything about this situation okay? Victoria recovered first. Leo, darling, I can explain. Save it. His voice could have frozen fire. The board is meeting right now to review evidence of your embezzlement. The police have probably already arrived at the office. Victoria's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. I'm your wife. No, Leonardo said quietly. You're a criminal who's been stealing from my company and manipulating my life for years. And you, he turned to Isabella, his eyes full of pain and wonder as he looked at the twins. You're the woman I never stopped loving. And those are my children, aren't they? Alexander and Olivia looked between the adults with growing understanding. Mommy? Olivia's small voice trembled. Is he our daddy? The question hung in the air like shattered glass. Isabella felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, sweet girl, he is. Victoria's laugh was ugly. How touching. The happy family reunion. But you're forgetting something, Isabella. Leonardo threw you away once before. What makes you think he won't do it again? Because this time I know the truth. Leonardo stepped forward, placing himself between Victoria and Isabella's family. Their family. I know how you orchestrated everything. The lies about Isabella's infertility, the doctored medical records, the careful manipulation of my grief over our supposed inability to have children. You can't prove any of that, Victoria snapped, but fear had crept into her voice. Actually, Isabella said quietly, we can prove all of it. Your brother James was quite thorough in his record-keeping. Victoria's composure finally cracked. She lunged forward, as if to attack Isabella, but Leonardo caught her arm. At that moment, 2 police officers appeared in the doorway. Victoria Chen Reynolds. One officer stepped forward. You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, screaming threats and accusations, Isabella held her children close. Leonardo stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure of his place in this tableau. Can we? He cleared his throat. Can we talk? All of us. Isabella looked at her twins, their twins, who were watching their father with a mixture of fear and fascination. 6 years of secrets and pain hung between them all, but also possibility. Yes, she finally said. I think it's time we all talked. The family restaurant they chose for dinner was a far cry from the upscale venues where they'd confronted Victoria's betrayal hours earlier. Isabella sat beside her children in a cozy booth, watching them color on their placemats while stealing glances at their father. Leonardo occupied the seat across from them, his usual corporate polish stripped away by exhaustion and emotion. I don't know where to begin, he admitted, his eyes fixed on Alexander's careful coloring. The boy had inherited not just Leonardo's eyes, but his precise attention to detail. Neither do I. Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she helped Olivia with her crayon. The last 6 hours have changed everything. After Victoria's arrest, they'd retreated to Isabella's apartment to talk, but the weight of revelations and years of pain had made real conversation impossible. Instead, they'd watched the twins process the earth-shattering news that the man they'd known as Mr. Reynolds was actually their father. Why didn't you tell us before? Olivia asked now, looking up from her drawing. Her question carried all the direct simplicity of a child's perspective. Leonardo leaned forward, his voice gentle. Your mother had very good reasons for keeping this secret. I wasn't a good person when you were born. That's not true, Isabella found herself saying. You were a good person who made terrible choices based on lies you were told. Still my choices, Leonardo countered quietly. I should have trusted you, should have seen through Victoria's manipulation. Alexander put down his crayon, fixing his father with a serious look that was painfully familiar. Did you love Mommy? The question hung in the air like crystal, beautiful but fragile. Leonardo's eyes met Isabella's across the table. I loved your mother more than anything in the world. His phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. The screen displayed his mother's name. I should take this. Nathan's still with her. Isabella nodded, understanding the complexity of their situation. Leonardo had 3 children to think about now, not just the twins. As he stepped away to take the call, Olivia tugged at her sleeve. Is Nathan really our brother? Half-brother, Isabella corrected gently. And yes, technically he is. But a lot has happened, sweetheart. These relationships will take time to figure out. Is he going to live with us now? Alexander asked, a protective edge in his voice. No, honey. Nathan lives with his mother, with Victoria. The complexity of explaining Victoria's crimes and arrest to 5-year-olds was beyond her at the moment. But maybe, someday, you'll all get to know each other better. Leonardo returned, his face troubled. Nathan's asking questions about everything. My mother thinks I should bring him here, let him meet. He gestured helplessly at the twins. But is that too much too soon? Isabella studied the man before her, so different from the cold, manipulated person who had thrown her out 6 years ago, yet still carrying echoes of the man she'd fallen in love with. What do you think? I think these past 6 hours have taught me that secrets and lies destroy lives. He ran a hand through his hair. Nathan deserves the truth, even if it's complicated. But I won't push this on you or the twins if you're not ready. Olivia surprised them both by declaring, he can share my crayons if he wants to color too. The simple kindness of a child's offer brought tears to Isabella's eyes. Leonardo looked equally moved, reaching across the table to squeeze his daughter's hand. That's very sweet of you, Olivia. But let's take things slowly, okay? Their food arrived. Pizza for the twins, pasta for the adults. As they ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. The twins, school activities, their favorite books, their different personalities. Leonardo drank in every detail, occasionally sharing glances with Isabella that held volumes of unspoken words. They're extraordinary, he murmured as they watched the twins attack their dessert. You've done an amazing job with them. They made it easy, Isabella replied. They've been my strength through everything. I've missed so much. The pain in his voice was raw. First steps, first words. We can't change the past, Isabella said softly. But maybe we can build something better for their future. And our future? Leonardo's question carried weight beyond its simple words. Before she could respond, Alexander asked sleepily, "Can we go to the park tomorrow? All of us." The hope in his voice made both parents pause. Isabella looked at Leonardo, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. They had moved from enemies to tentative co-parents in the space of a day, but the path forward remained unclear. "Perhaps we could start with breakfast," Leonardo suggested carefully. "There's a place near Central Park that makes great pancakes. Afterward, we could walk through the park if everyone feels up to it." The twins' enthusiastic agreement made the decision for them. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Leonardo insisted on paying, then helped gather the children's things with a natural attentiveness that made Isabella's heart ache. Outside, the New York evening had turned cool. Leonardo draped his jacket over Olivia when she shivered, the gesture so paternal it brought fresh tears to Isabella's eyes. "I can have my driver take you home," he offered, but Isabella shook her head. "We'll take a taxi. The twins need their routine right now and we all need time to process." Leonardo nodded, though she could see the reluctance in his eyes as he knelt to say goodbye to his children. "I'll see you tomorrow for pancakes. Promise?" both twins asked in unison. "I promise." His voice was thick with emotion. "I'll never break a promise to you again." As their taxi pulled away, Isabella watched Leonardo standing on the sidewalk, his figure growing smaller but his presence in their lives suddenly, irrevocably larger. The twins fell asleep against her during the ride home, their small faces peaceful despite the day's upheaval. In her apartment, after tucking them into bed, Isabella found a text from Leonardo. "Thank you for today, for giving me a chance to know them, for possibly giving me a chance to make things right." She stared at the message for a long time, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The revenge she'd planned seemed hollow now, replaced by something more complex and frightening. Hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining things to Nathan, dealing with the fallout from Victoria's arrest, navigating their new reality as co-parents. But for tonight, Isabella allowed herself to imagine a future where her children had both parents in their lives, where old wounds might finally begin to heal. She replied simply, "See you tomorrow for pancakes." Sometimes, she realized, the best revenge wasn't destruction at all. Sometimes it was building something new from the ashes of what was lost. The pancake breakfast felt surreal. Isabella watched as Leonardo helped Olivia cut her stack into perfect triangles, while Alexander methodically arranged his blueberries into patterns. The morning sunlight streaming through the restaurant's windows created an almost dreamlike quality to the scene. "More syrup, Daddy?" Olivia asked, the word Daddy still new and experimental on her tongue. Leonardo's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the syrup pitcher, his eyes bright with emotion. "You'll have to be careful," he said, maintaining his composure. "Too much syrup might make you too sweet." The twins giggled, and Isabella felt her heart constrict. It was moments like these, simple, ordinary moments, that they'd all been robbed of for years. Before she could dwell on that thought, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Reynolds Enterprises CFO arrested. Corporate scandal rocks Wall Street. Leonardo noticed her expression change. More headlines. She nodded, turning her phone so he could see. The twins were thankfully too absorbed in their breakfast to notice the tension that crossed their father's face. "The board's calling an emergency meeting this afternoon," he said quietly. "They want you there." "Me? Why?" "Because you uncovered everything. And because—" He hesitated, glancing at the twins. "We need to discuss succession planning. Victoria's arrest has implications for Nathan's trust fund and inheritance." The mention of Nathan sobered them both. Leonardo's mother had texted earlier to say the boy was still refusing to talk about yesterday's events. Isabella couldn't blame him. At 10 years old, his entire world had been upended. "How is he?" she asked softly. "Lost. Angry. My mother says he spent all night drawing. Apparently, he does that when he's upset." Leonardo's voice caught. Another trait that didn't come from me or Victoria. Their eyes met in shared understanding. Nathan's biological father was still unknown. Another piece of Victoria's elaborate deception. Maybe, Isabella started carefully, maybe the twins could write him a letter. Nothing pressuring. Just an introduction. Leonardo's face softened. "You'd be okay with that? They're siblings. Leo, however complicated the circumstances, that's a connection that deserves a chance." Before he could respond, Olivia tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go to the park now? You promised." The morning air was crisp as they walked through Central Park. The twins ran ahead, their energy boundless, while Isabella and Leonardo followed at a more measured pace. Occasionally their hands would brush, sending electricity through Isabella's arm. "I keep thinking about the day you left," Leonardo said suddenly. "Or rather, the day I made you leave. If I had known you were pregnant, would it have changed things?" Isabella asked, watching Alexander help Olivia climb onto a swing. "You believed I couldn't have children. Victoria's lies about my infertility were what drove you away. I was a fool." His voice was heavy with regret. "A fool who trusted the wrong person and hurt the only woman I've ever truly loved." Isabella's heart stuttered at his use of present tense. But before she could respond, her phone rang. It was her lawyer. "Victoria's asking for a deal," her lawyer informed her. "She wants to trade information about the embezzlement scheme for a reduced sentence. She specifically mentioned having evidence about the medical records she falsified 6 years ago." Isabella's hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of evidence?" "Documents proving she bribed your doctor to falsify infertility test results. She's willing to testify that it was all part of a long-term plan to gain control of Reynolds Enterprises through Leonardo." After ending the call, Isabella relayed the conversation to Leonardo. His face darkened with each word. "And she planned it all," he said, his voice tight with anger. "From the very beginning, before we were even married, she and her brother were plotting to take everything." "Dad," Alexander called from the playground. "Watch me go across the monkey bars." Leonardo's expression transformed instantly, pride and joy replacing anger as he watched their son navigate the bars with determination. "Be careful, buddy." Isabella observed the interaction, noting how naturally Leonardo had slipped into the role of father. It both warmed and terrified her. Warm because her children deserved this love. Terrifying because her heart wasn't ready to trust him completely. "The board meeting," and she said, returning to business. "What exactly do they want from me?" "Officially, your insights into the financial irregularities you uncovered." Leonardo turned to face her fully. "Unofficially, they want to know if you'll consider taking Victoria's position as CFO." Isabella's shock must have shown on her face because he continued quickly. "You're the most qualified candidate. You understand our systems. You've already identified and begun correcting Victoria's manipulation, and the board trusts you." "The board doesn't know who I really am," she pointed out. "Maybe it's time they did." Leonardo's eyes held hers. "No more secrets, no more lies. We tell them everything. About our past, about the twins, about why you really came back. Let them judge us on the whole truth." "That's a huge risk," Isabella whispered. "For both of us. I'm tired of living in Victoria's web of lies." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Whatever happens with us personally, our children deserve to live in the light of truth." As if on cue, the twins raced over, breathless and laughing. "Push us on the swings," Olivia demanded, grabbing Leonardo's free hand. "Both of you," Alexander added, taking Isabella's. They spent the next hour at the playground, taking turns pushing the twins on swings and catching them at the bottom of slides. To anyone passing by, they would have looked like any normal family enjoying a Sunday morning. But Isabella felt the weight of the upcoming board meeting like a shadow over the sunshine. As they prepared to leave the park, Leonardo received a text that made him frown. "Nathan's asking to see the twins," he said quietly. "My mother says he has something he wants to give them." Isabella looked at their children, who were attempting to teach each other cartwheels on the grass. "Maybe it's time. If he's reaching out, we should encourage that connection." "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted, but I'm trying to make decisions based on hope instead of fear. Leonardo's eyes filled with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. I don't deserve your generosity. This isn't about deserving, she replied softly. It's about doing what's right for all our children. They agreed to meet that evening at Leonardo's mother's house. Neutral territory for what would undoubtedly be a delicate first meeting between the siblings. As they parted ways outside the park, Leonardo to prepare for the board meeting and Isabella to take the twins home, he caught her hand one last time. Whatever happens at the meeting, he said earnestly, know that I'm grateful for this second chance, not just with the twins, but with you. Isabella withdrew her hand gently. Let's focus on the children for now, she said, but her heart raced at the intensity of his gaze. Later, as she helped the twins pick out clothes for meeting their brother, Isabella wondered if she was truly ready for all these changes. The revenge she'd planned had been straightforward, destroy Leonardo's world as he had destroyed hers. But life had offered something more complicated, the chance to build something new from the ashes of their past. The question was, did she have the courage to take that chance? The Reynolds Enterprises boardroom felt different with Victoria's absence. Isabella sat beside Leonardo at the massive mahogany table, aware of every board member's scrutiny. Her presentation on the financial irregularities had been comprehensive, clinical, and devastating. So not only did Mrs. Reynolds orchestrate the Chen tech fraud, Board Chairman Richard Matthews summarized, but she's been systematically embezzling funds since before her marriage to Leonardo. Yes, Isabella confirmed, her voice steady. The evidence suggests this was a long-term strategy orchestrated by Victoria and her brother James Chen to gain control of Reynolds Enterprises. And you discovered all this in just 3 months? Another board member asked skeptically. That's remarkably thorough work, Ms. Carter. Leonardo shifted in his chair. There's something else the board needs to know. He glanced at Isabella, receiving her slight nod. Miss Carter's real name is Isabella Reynolds. She was my first wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella watched shock, understanding, and calculation cross various faces around the table. Finally, Chairman Matthews spoke. I remember you, he said quietly. You were at the company Christmas party 6 years ago before the unpleasantness. Yes, Isabella admitted. I returned to Reynolds Enterprises under my mother's maiden name, with the initial intention of exposing Victoria's manipulation. What I discovered was far worse than I imagined. This is quite the revelation, another board member commented dryly. Should we be concerned about personal vendettas influencing company decisions? My findings are thoroughly documented, Isabella replied calmly. Every transaction, every manipulation, every false document, it's all there for your independent verification. My personal history with the company doesn't change the facts. No, Chairman Matthews agreed. But it does raise questions about future leadership. Leonardo, given these circumstances. I have complete faith in Isabella's professional integrity, Leonardo interrupted firmly. In fact, I'm formally recommending her for the position of CFO. More silence followed this announcement. Isabella felt the weight of a dozen calculating stares, but she kept her expression neutral. Everything she'd worked for hung in this moment. There's one more thing you should know, she said, her voice clear in the quiet room. Leonardo and I have children together, twins. They were born after our separation, and he only learned of their existence yesterday. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Chairman Matthews raised his hands for silence. This is unprecedented. You understand our concern about having formerly married co-parents in our 2 highest executive positions. What should concern you more, Leonardo countered, is losing the person best qualified to restore stability to our financial operations. Isabella didn't just uncover Victoria's fraud. She's already developed strategies to mitigate the damage and prevent future manipulation. The discussion continued for another hour, but Isabella sensed the tide turning in their favor. Her detailed knowledge of the company's operations, combined with her clear plans for recovery, gradually overwhelmed concerns about her personal connection to Leonardo. By late afternoon, she had been officially appointed as CFO of Reynolds Enterprises, with the stipulation that an independent oversight committee would monitor major financial decisions for the first year. Congratulations, Leonardo said softly as they left the boardroom. You earned this. We both know I originally came here for revenge, Isabella reminded him, straightening papers in her portfolio to avoid his intense gaze. But you stayed for justice, he corrected. There's a difference. Before she could respond, both their phones buzzed with messages from Leonardo's mother. The children were getting restless waiting for them. The drive to Margaret Reynolds' Upper East Side townhouse was tense with anticipation. They had agreed to have all 3 children meet there, hoping the neutral territory and Margaret's presence would ease the transition. Nathan's nervous, Leonardo said, breaking the silence. He spent all morning working on something for the twins. The twins are nervous too, Isabella admitted. Alexander asked if Nathan would like them, and Olivia's been unusually quiet. They found all 3 children in Margaret's sunroom. Nathan sat apart from the twins, clutching a large sketchbook. Alexander and Olivia huddled together on a window seat, watching their older brother with cautious curiosity. "Hello, darlings." Margaret greeted them warmly. Isabella had always liked Leonardo's mother, who had opposed Victoria from the beginning. "Nathan has something he'd like to share." The boy approached the twins hesitantly, his previous anger replaced by uncertainty. I drew these for you," he said, opening his sketchbook. "Since we're, family now." Isabella's breath caught as she saw the drawings. Nathan had created individual portraits of Alexander and Olivia based on their brief encounter at school. The artwork showed remarkable talent for a 10-year-old, capturing not just their features but something of their personalities. "These are amazing," Olivia exclaimed, her natural enthusiasm breaking through her shyness. "You made me look like a princess." "You drew my freckles exactly right," Alexander added, studying his portrait with serious appreciation. Nathan's face lit up at their praise. "I can teach you how to draw if you want. If it's okay." He glanced uncertainly at the adults. "We'd love that," Isabella said warmly, while Leonardo nodded encouragement. The ice broken, the children gradually began to interact more naturally. Margaret produced cookies and art supplies, and soon all 3 were sprawled on the floor, drawing together while the adults watched from the doorway. "They're going to be okay," Margaret murmured, squeezing her son's arm. "Children are remarkably resilient when given the chance. More resilient than adults, sometimes," Leonardo agreed, his eyes meeting Isabella's. Later, after Nathan had extracted promises from the twins to come back soon, and Margaret had insisted on keeping all 3 children overnight for a proper cousins sleepover, Isabella and Leonardo found themselves alone in his mother's garden. "They're beautiful together," Isabella said softly, watching through the window as their children listened to Margaret read a bedtime story. "All 3 of them. Like they were always meant to be siblings," Leonardo agreed. He turned to face her fully. "Isabella, I know we've agreed to focus on the children, but I need to say something." Her heart began to race. "Leo, I never stopped loving you," he said simply. "Even when I believed Victoria's lies, even when I was consumed by anger and hurt, some part of me never stopped. Seeing you with our children, watching you protect this company, understanding the strength it took to raise our twins alone, I fall in love with you more every day." Isabella felt tears threatening. We can't, I know." He stepped closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I know you don't trust me yet. I know we have years of pain to work through. But I want you to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, however long it takes. Whatever I need to do to prove myself worthy of your trust again, I'll do it." A shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, and Isabella was reminded of another night, years ago, when they had stood in a garden and made wishes about their future. Everything had gone so wrong after that, but here they were, somehow finding their way back to each other. "One day at a time," she whispered, not quite a rejection, not quite an acceptance. Leonardo smiled, understanding. "One day at a time," he agreed. They stood together in the gathering dusk, watching their children through the window, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 6 years, it held the promise of hope. A month into her role as CFO, Isabella found herself working late again, poring over documents that revealed the full extent of Victoria's deception. Each discovery felt like opening another door in a house of horrors. Tonight's revelation was particularly disturbing, evidence that Victoria had been monitoring Isabella's life during all 6 years of their separation. A knock at her office door made her look up. Leonardo stood there, his tie loosened, looking as exhausted as she felt. "The kids are asking if you're still coming for movie night." The weekly family movie night had become a tradition, part of their careful attempt to build a new normal. All three children together, with both parents present. It was messy and complicated and somehow perfect. Just 5 more minutes, Isabella promised, but Leonardo shook his head. You said that an hour ago. Whatever Victoria did, it can wait until tomorrow. As if summoned by her name, Isabella's phone lit up with a message from the district attorney. Victoria requesting meeting with both of you. Claims to have information about Nathan's biological father. Leonardo read the message over her shoulder, his body tensing. She's playing games again. Probably, Isabella agreed. But if there's any chance it could help Nathan. They'd all watched the boy struggle with questions about his identity over the past month. Despite forming a sweet bond with the twins, Nathan's pain about his parentage remained raw. We should at least hear what she has to say, Isabella continued softly. We owe him that much. Leonardo's hand found hers on the desk, a gesture that had become increasingly frequent. We'll go together tomorrow, but tonight belongs to our children. The drive to Leonardo's newly purchased townhouse was quiet, both lost in thoughts about tomorrow's confrontation with Victoria. They found all three children in the media room, already in pajamas, arguing good-naturedly about movie choices. Mom, Dad, Olivia called out. Tell Alexander we can't watch documentaries again. They're educational, Alexander defended, while Nathan rolled his eyes in a way that reminded Isabella painfully of Leonardo. How about we let Nathan choose tonight? Isabella suggested, settling onto the couch. Since he's leaving for summer camp tomorrow. The mention of camp brought mixed emotions to everyone's faces. 2 weeks at an prestigious art camp was an amazing opportunity for Nathan, but it would be the longest the siblings had been separated since meeting. I'll miss you guys, Nathan admitted quietly, and both twins immediately abandoned their movie debate to hug their brother. Leonardo caught Isabella's eye over their children's heads, his expression soft with wonder. These moments still caught them both by surprise, the simple miracle of their blended family finding its rhythm. The movie Nathan chose was an animated film about a family of superheroes, and soon all three children were absorbed in the story. Isabella felt Leonardo's arm slide behind her on the couch, not quite touching but present. Halfway through the movie, her phone vibrated with another message. This one made her blood run cold. Victoria's brother James had been released on bail and was making threats about setting the record straight. Leonardo felt her tension and glanced at her phone. His arm tightened protectively around her shoulders, this time making full contact. We'll handle it, he whispered. Together. Later, after the children were asleep, all three insisting on camping out in the media room for Nathan's last night before camp. Isabella and Leonardo sat in his kitchen, discussing strategy. James Chen has nothing left to lose, Isabella pointed out, cradling a cup of tea. His company is ruined, his reputation destroyed. That makes him dangerous. I've already increased security at the office and both our homes, Leonardo assured her, and the summer camp has been notified to be extra vigilant with Nathan. I should have anticipated this, Isabella sighed. I was so focused on Victoria, I underestimated her brother's potential for revenge. Hey, Leonardo moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. You're not alone in this anymore. Whatever James tries, we'll face it as a team. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. Over the past month, they'd fallen into an easy co-parenting rhythm, but moments like this still felt charged with unresolved emotion. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, she admitted. For something to go wrong. I'm not used to things working out. Neither am I, Leonardo agreed. But watching you with all three kids, seeing how you've helped Nathan cope with everything, I've never been more certain about anything than I am about us finding our way back to each other. Leo, Isabella started to pull away, but he held her hands firmly. I know, one day at a time, he smiled, but that doesn't change how I feel. Every day I fall more in love with the woman you've become, the mother you are to our children, all our children. Before she could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. Mom? Dad? They turned to find Alexander standing there, looking troubled. I had a bad dream, he admitted. Isabella started to rise, but Leonardo was already moving. Come here, buddy. He opened his arms, and Alexander ran into them without hesitation. Watching them together, Isabella felt something shift in her heart. The way Leonardo had instinctively known what their son needed. The natural way Alexander sought comfort from his father. It was everything she'd once dreamed of for her children. Want to talk about the dream? Leonardo asked softly. settling Alexander on his lap. I dreamed the bad lady came back and took you away again, Alexander whispered, and both parents froze. Isabella moved to join them, wrapping her arms around both her son and his father. That's never going to happen, sweetheart. Your dad and I won't let anyone separate our family again. Promise. Alexander's voice was small. Promise, Leonardo said firmly, meeting Isabella's eyes over their son's head. In that moment, something crystallized between them, a recognition that their past pain and present challenges were all part of the journey that had brought them here, to this kitchen, holding their son together. After Alexander had fallen back asleep between his siblings, Isabella and Leonardo stood watching all three children. Nathan had protectively thrown an arm over his little brother in his sleep, while Olivia clutched her favorite stuffed animal. Whatever Victoria and James try tomorrow, Leonardo said quietly, this is what matters. This right here. Isabella nodded, allowing herself to lean slightly against him. One day at a time? One day at a time, he agreed, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. But every day, better than the last. The maximum security prison visiting room felt colder than it should in summer. Isabella sat beside Leonardo, both watching Victoria through the reinforced glass. She looked different in prison orange, her usual polish stripped away, but her eyes still held that calculating gleam. I was wondering how long it would take you to come, Victoria said, her voice distorted through the intercom. Especially after James made contact. Leonardo tensed beside Isabella. What game are you playing, Victoria? No game. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just offering truth in exchange for consideration at my sentencing. Starting with Nathan's father. Isabella felt Leonardo's hand find hers under the table. Go on, she said carefully. His name is Marcus Chen, our cousin. Victoria's revelation landed like a bomb. The Chen family has controlled everything from the beginning. Nathan was never meant to be your heir, Leonardo. He was our insurance policy. You used your own son as a pawn. Isabella's disgust was evident. Rich, coming from the woman who hid Leonardo's children for 6 years. Victoria's smile turned cruel. But that's not the real bombshell. James has proof that you knew about the Chen Tech fraud before you came back, Isabella. Proof that you used insider information to orchestrate your revenge. Isabella's blood ran cold. It was true. She had discovered Victoria's scheme months before returning to Reynolds Enterprises. That knowledge had shaped her entire strategy. If that proof exists, Leonardo said quietly, why hasn't James used it? Because I convinced him to wait. Victoria leaned forward. Here's my offer. I'll keep James quiet, tell the courts that Isabella was an unwitting pawn in my scheme, and provide documentation about Nathan's true parentage to help him understand his heritage. In exchange, I want immunity from additional charges and Leonardo's support at my sentencing. Before either could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the prison. Guards rushed past their visiting room, radios crackling with urgent messages. What's happening? Isabella demanded, but Victoria just smiled. Right on schedule, she whispered, just as the power went out. The next few minutes were chaos. Emergency lights cast everything in eerie red shadows as guards evacuated visitors. Isabella and Leonardo found themselves hurried through dark corridors toward the exit. My brother always had a flair for dramatic timing, Victoria called after them. You might want to check on the children. Terror shot through Isabella's heart. The twins were at school, and Nathan was at art camp upstate. She fumbled for her phone as they reached Leonardo's car, but the signal was jammed. It's a diversion, Leonardo realized, speeding toward the city. James is using the prison chaos as cover for something else. Finally, Isabella's phone connected. Messages flooded in. Missed calls from the twins, school, from Nathan's camp, from Leonardo's mother. She played the first voicemail on speaker. Mrs. Carter, there was an incident at pickup. A man claiming to be the children's uncle, but our security protocols worked. The twins are safe in lockdown. Police are on their way. The next message was from Nathan's camp. Mr. Reynolds, a man attempted to access the campus but was apprehended by security. Nathan is secure. He tried for all three of them, Isabella whispered in horror. James tried to take our children. Leonardo's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he accelerated. Call my mother. The townhouse has the best security. We'll gather everyone there. The next hour was a blur of coordinated movement. Police escort brought the twins from their school. Nathan was already en route with camp security. Leonardo's private security team swept the townhouse and surrounding area repeatedly. By nightfall, all 3 children were safely inside, along with Margaret Reynolds and a small army of security personnel. Isabella watched them playing a board game in the family room, their earlier fright eased by being together. James was arrested trying to leave the city, Leonardo reported, joining her at the window. And the prison incident was a sophisticated hack job, but no one was hurt. Victoria's privileges have been revoked. She really thought she could blackmail us with my past actions? Isabella shook her head. After everything she's done. She's desperate. Leonardo turned Isabella to face him. But whatever proof she claims to have about your knowledge of the fraud, we'll handle it. The board already knows you came back seeking justice. The details don't change what you've accomplished. Isabella met his eyes. I should have told you sooner, about knowing their scheme before I returned. You did tell me. He smiled softly. The day Victoria was arrested. Remember? You said you came for revenge but stayed for justice. That's all that matters. A commotion from the family room drew their attention. Nathan had apparently won the board game, and the twins were demanding a rematch while Margaret played referee. Look at them, Leonardo murmured. All the schemes, all the manipulation, none of it could prevent this family from finding its way back together. Are we? Isabella asked quietly. Back together. Instead of answering, Leonardo drew her into his arms. This time, she didn't resist. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, gentle at first, then deepening with 6 years of longing. Mom, Dad, gross! 3 voices chorused in unison, making them break apart laughing. Sorry, kids, Leonardo grinned, not looking sorry at all, but you might want to get used to it. Isabella felt her cheeks flush as Margaret winked at her. The older woman had been none too subtle about her hopes for reconciliation. Does this mean we'll all live together? Olivia asked hopefully. Like a real family. One step at a time, sweetheart. Isabella answered, but she didn't pull away from Leonardo's embrace. But we are a real family, no matter what. And no one can change that, Nathan added with surprising firmness. Not Victoria, not James, not anybody. Alexander nodded sagely. Because love is stronger than hate. That's what Mom always says. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes at her son's words. She had taught her children that lesson through the darkest times, never truly believing she would find its truth again herself. As the evening settled into quiet family time, with all 3 children piled onto one sofa watching a movie, Isabella and Leonardo stood in the kitchen doorway watching them. One day at a time, he whispered in her ear. She turned in his arms, seeing all their past pain and future possibilities reflected in his eyes. One day at a time, she agreed, but together. 6 months later, Isabella stood in front of the full-length mirror in her old bedroom at the Reynolds estate, hardly recognizing herself in the elegant cream-colored dress. The autumn sunlight streaming through the windows caught the diamond on her left hand, not Victoria's old ring, but a new one Leonardo had chosen specifically for her, representing their fresh start. Mom, you look like a princess, Olivia exclaimed, twirling in her own flower girl dress. She had been practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks. More like a queen, Nathan corrected from the doorway. At 11, he had taken his role as ring-bearer very seriously. Alexander's freaking out about his tie again, by the way. Isabella smiled, remembering how adamant her son had been about matching his tie perfectly to his father's. Can you help him? You're so good with those. As Nathan left to assist his brother, Margaret Reynolds entered, dabbing at her eyes. I never lost hope that this day would come, she said, adjusting Isabella's veil. Even during the darkest times, Isabella squeezed her soon-to-be mother-in-law's hand again. Thank you for always believing in us. The past 6 months had been a journey of healing and rebuilding. Victoria's sentencing had brought final closure, 20 years for fraud and embezzlement, with additional charges for the attempted kidnapping scheme. James Chen had taken a plea deal, providing evidence that cleared Isabella of any wrongdoing in exposing their crimes. But the real healing had happened in smaller moments. Family dinners where all 3 children squabbled over the last slice of pizza, Sunday afternoons in Central Park, quiet evenings when Leonardo would sketch while Isabella read, the twins doing homework, and Nathan practicing his art. A knock at the door revealed Alexander, his tie now perfectly straight. Dad's nervous, he reported with the gravity of a 6-year-old ring-bearer's assistant. He keeps pacing and asking if you're still here. Tell him his bride isn't going anywhere. Isabella said softly, remembering Leonardo's proposal 3 months ago. It had been a family affair, all three children helping him plan the perfect moment in their garden, where they had first reconnected. He had spoken not just of their love, but of their family's journey from brokenness to wholeness, from revenge to redemption. "It's time," Margaret announced, gathering the children. "Places, everyone." In the hallway, Isabella caught a glimpse of Leonardo pacing at the altar through a window. The garden wedding had been his idea, transforming the site of their painful past into the beginning of their future. The music began, and Isabella watched as their children preceded her down the aisle, Nathan walking tall and proud, the twins coordinating their steps just as they'd practiced. The gathered guests, board members, colleagues, friends who had supported their reconciliation, smiled at the picture they presented. Then it was her turn. As Isabella began her walk toward Leonardo, she remembered another walk 6 years ago, leaving this same house in tears, unknown to anyone that she carried 2 precious lives within her. Now she returned in joy, those same precious lives joining their family together. Leonardo's eyes filled with tears when he saw her, and Isabella felt her own emotions threaten to overwhelm her. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but it was the love shining in his eyes that took her breath away. "Hi," she whispered as she reached him. "Hi," he whispered back, taking her hands in his. The ceremony was a blur of emotion and perfect moments. The children's readings they had chosen together, the vows that spoke of second chances and eternal love, the rings that symbolized not just their reunion, but the completion of their family circle. "Therefore, by the power vested in me," the minister said finally, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Again, he added with a smile as their children cheered. The reception was a joyful celebration of not just their marriage, but their family's journey. Nathan had created beautiful portraits of everyone as table centerpieces. The twins had helped design the cake, insisting on both chocolate and vanilla layers, because that's what family is, different things that go perfectly together. Later, during their first dance, Leonardo held Isabella close. "Any regrets?" he murmured in her ear. "About marrying you twice?" She smiled up at him. "Only that we wasted 6 years getting here." "Not wasted," he corrected gently. "Those years gave us our children, taught us what really matters, made us strong enough for this second chance." Their dance was interrupted by all 3 children joining them on the floor, turning their romantic moment into an impromptu family dance party. Isabella laughed as Leonardo twirled Olivia, while Nathan taught Alexander his newest dance moves. As the evening wound down, the family gathered in the garden where everything had begun. The autumn air was crisp, stars twinkling above them just as they had the night Leonardo proposed. "Ready to go home?" Leonardo asked, wrapping his arms around her. Isabella looked at their children, Nathan showing the twins some constellations he'd learned at science camp, all 3 of them happy and secure in their shared love. She turned in her husband's arms, seeing their entire journey reflected in his eyes. "I am home," she said softly. "We all are." The revenge she had planned had transformed into something far more powerful: forgiveness, healing, and a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Their path hadn't been straight or easy, but it had led them exactly where they were meant to be, together, as a family, under the same stars that had witnessed their first love story, now bearing witness to their second and final chapter. If you were in Isabella's shoes after all the suffering and betrayal, would you be able to turn your desire for revenge into a second chance at love? At what point in the story did you realize that her revenge began to turn into forgiveness? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.